Have you ever been in a relationship with someone who seemed warm and engaged one moment, then suddenly distant and closed off the next? Someone who pulls away the moment things get serious, while who seems almost allergic to emotional intimacy. It can be confusing, even painful, especially if you have no idea why it keeps happening. Today, we are looking at avoidant attachment style, what it is, where it comes from, and crucially, whether it can actually change. Welcome back to Time for Psychology. If you caught our last video on anxious attachment, you will already know that attachment theory describes the patterns we develop early in life for how we connect with other people. Where anxious attachment involves a constant fear of being abandoned, avoidant attachment sits at the opposite end of the spectrum. People with an avoidant attachment style have learned, usually in childhood, that depending on others is not safe. So instead of seeking closeness, they protect themselves by pulling away from it. There are two main types worth knowing about. Dismissive avoidant people tend to see themselves as self-sufficient and independent, and often genuinely believe they do not need close relationships. Fearful avoidant people, sometimes called disorganized, actually want closeness but are deeply afraid of it at the same time, which creates a push-pull pattern that can be exhausting for everyone involved. Here's a few signs of avoidant attachment style. Sign number 1. A strong discomfort with emotional intimacy. Deep conversations about feelings, vulnerability, or the future of a relationship can feel genuinely overwhelming to someone with avoidant attachment, not because they do not care, but because closeness itself feels threatening. They might change the subject, make a joke, or simply go quiet when things start to feel too emotionally intense. Sign 2. Pulling away at exactly the moment when a relationship starts to deepen. Things might be going well, the connection feels real, and then almost without warning, they become distant, less responsive, or start finding reasons why this might not work. This is not necessarily a deliberate choice, but for many avoidant people, it is an automatic response to the discomfort and emotional closeness getting too real. Sign 3. An unusually strong emphasis on independence and self-sufficiency. Avoidant people often pride themselves on not needing anyone, handling everything alone, and keeping their personal space clearly defined. Needing help, or being needed too much, can feel like a threat to the sense of control they rely on to feel safe. Sign 4. Difficulty expressing emotions directly. This does not mean avoidant people do not have feelings. Research consistently shows they feel just as strongly as anyone else, but expressing those feelings out loud, or acknowledging them even to themselves, can feel uncomfortable or even pointless. They may come across as cold or indifferent when underneath there is actually quite a lot going on. Sign 5. A tendency to look back on past relationships or periods of being single with a kind of nostalgia. When a current relationship starts to feel demanding or emotionally intense, an avoidant person may find themselves thinking, "Things were simpler before," or "I was better off on my own." This is often the mind looking for a way back to emotional safety rather than a genuine reflection of how things were. So where does avoidant attachment come from? Like anxious attachment, the roots are usually in early childhood. Specifically, it tends to develop when caregiving was consistently emotionally unavailable, dismissive of feelings, or rewarded self-sufficiency over emotional expression. A child who learns that showing vulnerability leads to being ignored, dismissed, or told to toughen up will eventually stop showing vulnerability at all. The strategy works in childhood. It protects them, but carried into adult relationships, it creates a wall between them and the people they actually care about. It is worth saying clearly, avoidant attachment is not a character flaw, and it does not mean someone is selfish or incapable of love. It means they developed a protective strategy that made sense once and have not yet found a way to put it down. So, can avoidant attachment change? Yes, though it tends to move more slowly than anxious attachment, partly because the avoidant person often does not experience their pattern as a problem in the same way. A few things that might genuinely help are, first, awareness without judgment. Recognizing, I'm pulling away because this feels scary, not because I do not care. That's a meaningful first step, and one that takes real honesty. Second, small steps towards vulnerability. Avoidant people do not need to transform overnight. Even small moments of emotional honesty, saying, "I find this conversation hard," rather than shutting down completely, build new patterns over time. Third, working with a therapist who understands attachment. Approaches like emotionally focused therapy is specifically designed for this kind of deep relational pattern, and research shows they can be genuinely effective. And fourth, if you are in a relationship with someone avoidant, understanding that their pulling away is usually not about you is not just a comforting thought, it is accurate. Their pattern was formed long before you arrived. So, avoidant attachment often shows up as discomfort with emotional intimacy, pulling away when things get serious, a strong need for independence, difficulty expressing feelings, and idealizing life before the relationship got complicated. Like all attachment styles, it usually traces back to early experiences. And again, like all attachment styles, it can shift over time with the right awareness and support. Next week on Time for Psychology, we are bringing it all together. What actually happens when an anxious attachment style and an avoidant attachment style end up in a relationship together, and why this particular pairing is one of the most common and most painful dynamics in a relationship. If that sounds familiar, you'll not want to miss it. Hit subscribe and we'll see you then.